Hello everyone, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's continue Chapter 4, Part 2 of the Occult Investigator Real Cases from the Files of X-Investigations book by Bob Johnson. This case, the chapter again being called The Werewolf of Van Nuys. Last time we left, it was talking about some of the situations involving the encounters associated with this infamous werewolf. Here it goes into further detail and it'll end the chapter afterward. And of course I'll give my own brief thoughts and opinions on it too. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's continue part 2 of chapter 4, and then I'd love to hear what your own thoughts are as well. So here's what it says. What disturbed Sam most was the creature's eyes. He described them as bright yellow orbs that shone like two solid color marbles. I knew this was no man when I saw the eyes, and if it was a Halloween mask, it was a damn good one. But why would a prankster be darting in and out of trees? He would be somewhere he could frighten people. Oh, I was frightened all right, but he wasn't laying in wait for me. But I discovered why he was there after he ran away, and I saw the dead squirrels mangled on the ground. This thing was eating dinner, Sam told us. I asked Sam if he had any hard evidence, like Carrie's, to back up his story. But he told me the only thing left at the scene were the dead squirrels, and he surely wasn't going to save their carcasses. But he did add that although no one would come forward, there were other people at his school who admitted to him that they also saw some strange type of man-beast wandering after hours in the vicinity of the parking lot. They referred to him as the homeless guy to avert alarming the school's population. But from what I could gather, they were protecting themselves from being labeled crackpots. After our meeting with Sam, I called Savannah and told her to meet us back at the motel. We managed to use the hotel's conference room to discuss the case. What I wanted to do was draw a map of the local area, and with Jim's help, pinpoint all of the spots the werewolf has been sighted. I knew from the newspaper accounts that all of the sightings occurred within about a 3-mile radius, but I wanted to see if I could discover a pattern based on time, days of the week, and of course the full moon. We decided to also gather the exact accounts of the other witnesses and draw conclusions based on their sightings and particular clues. Most people simply saw the strange-looking creature darting about or running with something in its mouth. We also had reports of growling and howling. A man who lived close to Carrie mentioned that he walks his dog around 1 a.m. each night, and occasionally he heard howling that was very different from a dog's. I know a dog's howls, and there are a number of coyotes up in the hills that sometimes come down, especially when it's real hot and dry. But one night I heard this howl that was much different, and it was very close. At first I thought it was someone's TV, but it was too real. This was only a few blocks from my house. Then the next morning, my neighbor tells me some wild dogs killed his chickens. It was no dog that killed them chickens, not that night, the old man said. We finally got the lab results about the hair, and although I wasn't shocked at the findings, I was surprised to learn that the hair was canine but inconclusive. It could have come from a dog or a wolf. And even if it did come from a wolf's coat, a person so inclined could have made a costume containing that hair. But whether what we were after was a real werewolf, a psychotic, or a prankster, we now knew that someone or something was involved with the occult or knew enough about it to perpetrate a werewolf sighting. If animals were indeed victims, then who knew if humans would be next? What we needed to find out was how we could lure the werewolf and corner it to confirm what it really was. The patterns we saw indicated that it made appearances only in the evening, and interestingly enough, during a waxing moon cycle, the time building to the full moon. There were no sightings during a waning moon cycle. During the next 2 weeks, Savannah and I scoured the area where the sightings were reported, looking for clues. Unfortunately, this was such a heavily trafficked area that had regular maintenance either by homeowners or the local municipality. We found very few traces of what could have been our creature. One particular area that had more than one sighting and was not far from a local Santeria, Botanica, kept recurring to me as one that we might want to further investigate. It was a curious shop because it carried a variety of occult products, and not just the traditional botanica supplies. I noticed a number of Wiccan items in the store window and a fully stocked herb and potion counter. We decided that we would concentrate on this area near the store for 7 consecutive nights during the next waxing moon period. Jim helped us hire a nondescript van. We felt like CIA operatives and loaded it with supplies from the spy shop in LA. We packed in video recording equipment with night recording features, sound equipment that could pick up whispers 100 yards away, digital cameras, and some of our homemade devices for gathering supplies. Jim's brother, a local sheriff's deputy, even managed to get us an animal tranquilizer gun just in case we were attacked by whatever lurked in the street of Van Nuys. So 3 nights had passed with no sighting. The 3 of us rotated sleeping and keeping watch on the area. The most interesting thing we had seen so far was an ordinary howling and screaming alley cat fight. Savannah told us that a fight of cats always precedes some traumatic event in her native country's folklore. I remember a cat fight always preceded someone's shoe being thrown at them in Brooklyn, where I grew up. Jim and Savannah were getting antsy and suggested that we move to another spot, one closer to a wooded area that fit better with the werewolf's profile. But I had a reason to stick it out, one that proved to be correct. On the 4th evening at about 10:30 p.m., Savannah's cell phone rang. The call was from a close friend of Carrie's who had gotten our number in case she had ever spotted anything strange. The locals stuck together, especially when it came to protecting their family. I could see Savannah's eyes widen even in the dimly lit van. "We must go to Krebs Street. The creature has been seen. Do you know where this is, Jim?" Jim knew the block, and we both asked Savannah simultaneously what had happened. "A little girl in her room. The werewolf was there," was all that Savannah could reply. "We must go now." When we arrived at the house on Krebs Street, the police were just leaving. As we approached the front door, a large man in a white t-shirt with the legend Valley Concrete in red letters blocked our path and asked who we were and what we wanted. Jim identified himself as a reporter, which immediately put the giant on the defensive. We learned that the man was the girl's father from her mother Felicia, who came out and explained to him that we were the investigators searching for the beast. She welcomed us in and began her harrowing tale. Felicia told us that she put her 8-year-old daughter Teresa to bed, as she did every night at about 7 o'clock. Teresa slept in the back room on the first floor. The parents were in the living room watching TV when they heard a snarling noise from their backyard. Little did they know that Teresa was awake, sitting up in bed, looking at the big dog trying to push its way into her room. Felicia said, "We always leave the window cracked for air, but it has a screen and a lock, so it can only open so far." Teresa was sleeping when she heard a noise like scratching against that screen. My little girl told me she sat up in bed in the dark and saw a dog with 2 large yellow eyes pushing its nose against the screen and using its head to push up the window. That's when we heard the growling and we ran into her room. And when the parents entered the room, Teresa's eyes were fixed on the window, but the werewolf had disappeared from sight. We asked if we could enter the room, and Felicia obliged. The first thing we noticed was a wet spot that covered about a 6-inch radius on the screen. I asked Felicia if it had been touched, and she said that she had cleaned it off with the household cleaner. I was hoping we could have gotten a sample for our analysis. And so we searched the area outside of the window, and it was just our luck that it began to rain. As we were rummaging around, we heard movement in the bushes that bordered the side of the house. I tried to grab Savannah's arm, but she was too quick and ran directly towards the noise with her digital camera in hand. I lost my footing in the mud, and by the time I regained my composure, Savannah was already near the source of the noise. I heard a growling sound and more rustling. Savannah shouted, "I think it's here, Robert." And when I got to the spot, Savannah had already shot dozens of frame. And although we all stomped through the bushes in search of the werewolf, we couldn't find anything. I had a hunch, so I told the crew to jump back in the van and return to our stakeout spot by the Botanica. I told Savannah to check the shots on the digital camera as we drove away. Out of almost 30 pictures, there was only one that appeared to show what looked like a man hunched over and running through the bushy area. We could definitely make out a figure and flowing hair, and we were encouraged by our first real break. I was now confident that we were on the right track, but Savannah asked me why we were headed back to the stakeout spot when we had just seen evidence that the creature was some distance away. I explained that I noticed that the botanica had carried a variety of herbs used in occult ritual and workings, including nightshade and henbane, plants that contain psychoactive alkaloids. These substances, when used as a rubbing salve or ingested as a tonic, cause hallucinatory effects that have been recorded in a number of instances of lycanthropy. Occult lore tells of many stories where those who wish to shape change into animals, especially wolves, ingest these herbal ingredients to act out their wishes, I said. My hunch is that our werewolf has been rummaging through the botanica's dumpster in search of these ingredients. From what I understood, the effects only last a short time, so if our werewolf is hooked, he'll be back for more in a short time. We were disappointed that our monster didn't show up that night. We all fell asleep in the van and were awoken by the clang of the front gate of the Botanica opening for the day. I decided to walk over and speak with the woman unlocking the door. She was understandably anxious about an unshaven man in rumpled clothes asking questions about werewolves at 10 a.m. But after I explained who I was and what X Investigations was all about, Maria, the owner, was friendly and cooperative. Over a cup of freshly brewed coffee, I explained our case, and she nodded that she had heard the rumors. Some people have come to me asking advice, but I tell them I do not fool around in the spirit world, Mary said. She didn't offer any hard clues, and she couldn't tell me of anyone who regularly asked for nightshade or henbane. She did caution that these ingredients are sometimes poisonous and that we should be careful with them. I assured her they weren't for us, but asked her how she disposed of her old herbs. She said she tossed them in the dumpster outside in green bags because they are biodegradable. She would do this every so often, whether or not the stock was old, just to be sure she sold only the freshest products. It dawned on me that if our werewolf was looking for the hallucinogens, he had to get there before the trash was picked up. We were seeking him at night when he was prowling. What we needed to do was nab him during the day. I asked Maria if anyone regularly went through her trash, and she said that there was an old homeless man from the woods who would come down and had to be chased away. Coincidentally, he was interested in the green trash bags more than any other. Maria described him as a tall man with a hunched-over walk and very long hair. He comes down from the hills. I think he lives up there in the caves. He has many animals with him, Maria said. When old Sam, the homeless mountain man, was taken into custody by the sheriff's department, he was questioned about his whereabouts and actions and what he was taking from the dumpster near Mary's store. Jim was able to get some inside information from a friend of his at the sheriff's department who said that the shrinks who examined Sam had determined he suffered from psychotic episodes and had multiple personality disorders. He noted that Sam had a number of animal hides and skins that could be worn like ceremonial clothing. A common werewolf legend tells of would-be werewolves who made belts from wolf hides that they'd wear as they were shape-changing. This could have explained the hair clump Carrie had found near her sighting. Sam was committed to a state mental facility for observation, but despite the fact we had spent a very long time on this no-pay case, we decided to remain in Van Nuys for another week. Since there were no further reports of werewolf sightings and we had run out of time, we were fairly satisfied that Sam was either a deranged person with some occult leanings or that our real werewolf had gotten away. We landed at JFK International Airport the next day. As soon as I turned on my cell phone, I got a message beep to call Jim in LA. I barely said hello when Jim said, "Robert, there's been another werewolf sighting." I chuckled as I asked him if old Sam was back on the street, but Jim said that he checked with his buddy at the sheriff's department who told him Sam had been committed permanently. He sounded very concerned and added, "Here's another thing, Robert. My buddy got me a copy of the transcript of Sam's talks with the shrinks. This is the last thing he said to his doctor. Are you ready for this?" I said, "Shoot," and then Jim read me these lines from the transcript. So the doctor said, "So Sam, you understand that you are not really an animal at all, but are a sound human, correct?" And Sam said, "Oh, I understand, doctor, but you must understand also there are many, many more of my kind out there, and we are very, very hungry." then that's it. That's everything that ends as far as chapter 4 of The Werewolf of Van Nuys from the Occult Investigator, Real Cases from the Files of X-Investigations book. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. For starters, what a twist, right? It looks like there's not just one, but two twists associated with it. So all this time, at least up to a certain point, it looks like the shape-changing werewolf could be Old Sam, this homeless mountain man that was apparently discovered late in the game, being someone that was rummaging through that garbage, taking all those hallucinatory herbs, and then by taking them, it looks like changing, at least in his mind, but not really, instead just acting more like a werewolf. And the fact that he had all these animal hides and then skins and then something else as far as, unshaven and hunched over and long hair, in the darkness at least, it could have looked like he was a werewolf, especially if he was acting like one, snarling like one, moving like one, and so on. So it looks like in this case, Bob Johnson was able to figure that information out with the help of Sylvana. They were able to realize that this person, whatever it was causing some ruckus, but they were found, at least with regards to their origin, being that dumpster that had all that hallucinatory herb. Interesting stuff, right? Makes you wonder at least like if it was truly him, because now the way the chapter ends, it ends with a little tease. It's the idea that there's more werewolf sightings. They were convinced that everything was done once Old Sam was captured, and it turns out that there was no shape-shifting werewolf, that it was just this old man, this homeless man that was acting like one. And then apparently more werewolf sightings are happening, and Sam was stating that there's many more of his kind out there. Makes you wonder, scratch your head, what's going on in Van Nuys, right? Is there truly something else out there? Fascinating stuff. I don't know if there's going to be another part to this chapter, like another continuation. When I was reading that info, I totally understood if Bob Johnson could only last so long out there on an unpaid trip. Eventually he had to go back and then start doing his regular stuff. But in this case, it looks like there's still some more stuff out there on these werewolves. Interesting stuff. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.